I'm Emma, 26 female. I'm here to share a story about family drama that's been brewing for years but hit its peak recently. It revolves around my older sister Jessica, 30F, our complicated sibling dynamic, and a wedding that turned everything upside down. Jessica and I have always had a strange relationship. She's the textbook definition of the golden child, outgoing, confident, and effortlessly charming. Growing up, she was the star of every family gathering. She was prom queen, valedictorian, and the one everyone assumed would go far. Meanwhile, I was the quieter, artsy kid who stayed in the background. I didn't mind it much until I got older and realized how much space Jessica seemed to take up in every room. In my early teens, I discovered makeup. It started as a hobby, watching YouTube tutorials and experimenting with drugstore products. Over time, it became a form of self-expression for me. I loved how a swipe of eyeliner or a bold lip could make me feel more like myself. By the time I was in college, makeup wasn't just something I enjoyed, it was a part of who I was. People started noticing too. Compliments about my makeup became a regular thing. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just Jessica's little sister. I was Emma, and people were seeing me for me. This shift didn't go unnoticed by Jessica. She never said anything outright, but I could tell it bothered her. Little comments started creeping in. Wow, Emma, you're wearing a lot of makeup today. Or, don't you think that's a bit much for brunch? It felt like she was trying to pull me back into her shadow, but I brushed it off. I wasn't going to stop doing something that made me happy just because it made her uncomfortable. Fast forward to earlier this year when Jessica announced her engagement to her long-term boyfriend. The wedding planning kicked into high gear, and as expected, Jessica was the center of attention. I was genuinely happy for her, even though the family dynamic hadn't changed much. Our mom was practically glued to Jessica's side, helping her pick out flowers and centerpieces, while I was mostly kept in the loop through group chats. Then came the bombshell. At a family dinner, Jessica pulled me aside and casually mentioned that she had a small request for the wedding and the events leading up to it. She asked me to tone down my makeup for her engagement party and the wedding. At first, I thought she was joking. But no, she was dead serious. She said she didn't want me drawing attention on her big day. I was stunned. It wasn't like I was planning to show up in glitter eyeliner and neon lipstick, not that there's anything wrong with that. I just wanted to wear makeup the way I always do. It felt unfair and controlling. I told her I'd think about it, but the conversation left a bad taste in my mouth. The next day, I brought it up to my parents. My mom immediately took Jessica's side, saying, "It's her wedding. You should respect her wishes." My dad, ever the peacemaker, stayed neutral, saying he understood both perspectives. It was clear that if I pushed back, I'd be painted as the difficult one. To keep the peace, I reluctantly agreed to scale back my makeup for the engagement party. I showed up wearing a barely there look, light foundation, a hint of mascara, and a neutral lip. The reactions were not great. People kept commenting on how different I looked, asking if I was feeling okay, or if I'd stopped wearing makeup altogether. Jessica, on the other hand, seemed pleased. She spent most of the night basking in the attention and barely acknowledged me. It was frustrating, but I held my tongue. Things came to a head later that night. After the party, Jessica cornered me in the kitchen and accused me of not trying hard enough to tone down my appearance. She said the comments from guests about my new look made her feel like I was still trying to steal the spotlight. That was the last straw. I told her I wasn't going to change who I was just to make her feel better about herself. She stormed off, and the tension between us has been unbearable ever since. The next day, I turned to Reddit for advice. I laid everything out, from Jessica's request to the engagement party fallout. The responses were mixed. Some people said I should compromise since it's her wedding, while others called out Jessica's insecurities and controlling behavior. The most upvoted comment said, "This isn't about makeup, it's about your sister's inability to handle not being the center of attention." That hit a nerve because it felt true. Since then, things have only gotten more awkward. At a recent family dinner, Jessica brought up the makeup issue again, accusing me of always needing to be the star. I finally snapped and told her I wouldn't attend any more wedding events if she kept dictating my choices. The room went silent, and I left feeling both relieved and guilty. Now, the family is divided. Jessica is telling anyone who will listen that I'm trying to ruin her wedding, while I'm over here wondering how we got to this point. All I wanted was to support my sister without losing myself in the process. But right now, that feels impossible. Update 1. After the family dinner blow-up, I thought things would calm down, but I was dead wrong. The next morning, my mom called me, her voice unusually stern. She got straight to the point. I needed to apologize to Jessica and agree to her simple request. She insisted that weddings are stressful and that I should make it easier on my sister by giving in. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an ultimatum. If I didn't comply, I'd be the one causing unnecessary family drama. Later that evening, my dad called. His tone was quieter, almost apologetic. He admitted he didn't think Jessica's request was fair but urged me to consider keeping the peace for the family's sake. He wasn't pushy like my mom, but it still felt like pressure. He even joked about how Jessica had always been a little high maintenance but said this was just how she dealt with stress. I could tell he didn't want to take sides, but the message was clear. I was on my own in this. Meanwhile, Jessica started texting me every single day. Her messages weren't long, but they were relentless. She kept repeating how selfish I was being, how my makeup choices were disrespectful, and how I was making everything harder for her. It felt like she was trying to wear me down. At one point, she even brought up old grudges, like how I supposedly always had to make things about myself. It was exhausting. Then she escalated things by bringing the issue into our family group chat. Jessica made a long post about how she was disappointed in my unwillingness to compromise and how hurtful it was that I couldn't support her on the most important day of her life. She didn't name me directly, but it was obvious who she was talking about. Cousins and aunts jumped in, mostly siding with Jessica. A few said things like, "It's her wedding. Just let her have this." One aunt even called me immature. I stayed quiet. There was no point arguing in a group chat where everyone had already picked their side. Feeling cornered, I vented to my best friend. She didn't sugarcoat it. She said this wasn't about makeup at all. It was about Jessica's insecurities. She told me to stand my ground, reminding me that I had every right to express myself. It was a reality check I desperately needed. A few days later was Jessica's bridal shower. I didn't want to go, but skipping it would have caused more drama. So I showed up wearing a very simple look, mascara, a bit of blush, and a nude lip. I figured it was neutral enough to avoid more complaints. Everything was fine at first, until Jessica spotted me talking to a group of her friends. She walked up, gave me a once-over, and accused me of still not getting it. She made a comment about my eyeliner being too much for her shower. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough that everyone around us heard. I wanted to sink into the floor. After that, I excused myself to the bathroom, trying to collect myself. The rest of the shower felt like a blur. Jessica avoided me, and I avoided her. By the end of the event, I knew I couldn't keep doing this. The constant criticism was too much. When I got home, I posted an update on Reddit. I asked if I should skip the wedding altogether to avoid more drama. The responses were overwhelmingly in my favor. People told me Jessica was being unreasonable and controlling. Some shared similar experiences with their own siblings, which made me feel less alone. The next morning, I got a private message from a cousin who had stayed quiet in the group chat. She admitted she thought Jessica was being unreasonable but said she didn't want to get involved. She told me she admired how I was standing up for myself and encouraged me to keep doing what felt right. Around this time, I started reflecting on my childhood. Jessica had always needed to be the center of attention. Every school recital, every family vacation, every holiday, it was always about her. If I ever tried to shine, even just a little, she found a way to overshadow me. It made sense now why she was so fixated on controlling my appearance for her wedding. This wasn't just about makeup, it was about her needing to feel superior. A few days later, Jessica texted me with a compromise. She said I could wear makeup to the wedding if she got to approve the look beforehand. I didn't even need time to think about it. I refused. It felt humiliating to even consider letting her dictate what I could or couldn't wear. She didn't take the rejection well. The next morning, Jessica posted in the group chat that I was officially uninvited from the wedding unless I apologized and agreed to her terms. It was a full-on family blow-up. Some relatives called me selfish, others stayed quiet. My dad sent me a private message saying he was sorry it had come to this, but he hoped I'd reconsider. I didn't. I stood my ground. The support I got from Reddit helped me feel confident in my decision. Most commenters told me I wasn't wrong and reminded me that family doesn't get to control you just because they're family. So, as of now, I'm not going to the wedding. Jessica can have her day exactly how she wants it. I just hope it's worth all the drama she's caused. Update 2. After Jessica officially uninvited me from her wedding, the fallout was immediate. Within days, my phone was blowing up. Aunts, uncles, and cousins began calling and texting, accusing me of being selfish and ruining Jessica's big day. It was like Jessica had put out a family-wide PB, painting me as the villain who dared to say no to the bride. The messages weren't just from immediate family either. A second cousin I hadn't spoken to in years texted me out of the blue, saying I should just apologize and move on. The general theme was that weddings are sacred, and I was overreacting. One aunt even called me jealous, which was laughable considering I had zero interest in competing with Jessica. Thankfully, my friends had my back. My best friend, in particular, went into full cheerleader mode, reminding me I wasn't the one being unreasonable. Another friend offered to take me out for drinks, calling it a celebration of dodging bridezilla bullets. Their support kept me grounded while my family seemed intent on tearing me down. Then Jessica took things public. She posted a photo of herself with the caption, "Some people don't know how to let others have their moment. Glad to know who really supports me." She didn't tag me, but the timing and tone made it clear who she was talking about. The comments section turned into a pity party, with her friends chiming in about how hard it must be for her to deal with toxic people. It was infuriating. I debated staying silent, but ultimately decided to write my own response, not on her post, but on my own page. I kept it measured, explaining that I respected Jessica's desire to have her day how she wanted it, but I also wasn't willing to compromise my identity to make someone else feel better. I didn't name Jessica or give specific details, but it was enough to stop some of the side eye I'd been getting from mutual acquaintances. Surprisingly, 2 cousins privately reached out to me after seeing my post. Both admitted they regretted siding with Jessica so quickly. One even said she felt pressured to back Jessica because it's her wedding. Their messages felt like small wins in what had been a losing battle. The wedding happened without me, but the drama didn't end there. A week later, photos from the event started popping up on social media. At first, I avoided them, not wanting to see what I'd missed. But curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on a few tagged photos. The pictures told an interesting story. Jessica looked gorgeous, as expected, but in several shots, her smile seemed forced. In one group photo, she looked outright annoyed. A mutual friend later told me there had been tension at the reception, though she didn't elaborate. Part of me wondered if Jessica had spent the night stressing over whether her big day was perfect enough. Then came my mom's call. She was crying before I even picked up. She begged me to reconcile with Jessica, saying that family comes first and that all this drama was tearing everyone apart. She even tried to guilt-trip me by saying Jessica had been so stressed in the weeks leading up to the wedding. I listened but didn't give her the response she wanted. If anything, her call just reinforced how much of the blame was being unfairly placed on me. A few days later, Jessica's husband got involved. He called me, claiming he wanted to mediate between us. He said Jessica was hurt by everything that had happened but insisted she still loves me deep down. It felt like he was trying to play both sides. I thanked him for reaching out but made it clear I wasn't interested in rehashing the argument. On a brighter note, I got some unexpected good news at work. My manager called me into her office and announced I'd been promoted to a senior position. The timing couldn't have been better. After weeks of family drama, it felt amazing to have something positive to focus on. My coworkers even threw me a small celebration, complete with cupcakes and a congratulatory card. One of them, a fellow makeup enthusiast, gifted me a high-end makeup set as a nod to my hobby. It was such a thoughtful gesture, and it reminded me that not everyone sees my passion as a problem. Meanwhile, my Reddit post started gaining traction. Comments poured in from strangers sharing their own stories of family drama. Some even messaged me privately to thank me for standing my ground, saying it inspired them to do the same in their lives. Knowing my experience resonated with others made me feel less alone. Then came the family meeting. My dad organized it, hoping to mend fences. I didn't want to go, but he insisted it was important. The meeting was exactly what I expected, tense and unproductive. Jessica doubled down, claiming my makeup overshadowed her even on regular days. She accused me of intentionally trying to steal the spotlight, and when I calmly pointed out how ridiculous that sounded, she stormed out of the room. I followed her lead shortly after, realizing there was no point in continuing. When I got home, I updated Reddit again. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, with people encouraging me to keep prioritizing my boundaries. One commenter summed it up perfectly. "You're not just fighting for yourself, you're teaching your family how to treat you." And that's exactly what I intend to keep doing. Update 3. A few weeks after the disastrous family meeting, something surprising showed up in my mailbox, a handwritten letter from Jessica. I hadn't heard directly from her since the meeting, so it caught me off guard. The letter was lengthy, filled with apologies and what sounded like genuine remorse. Jessica admitted she had been unfair, saying she let her insecurities get the better of her. She even acknowledged that her behavior during the wedding planning was controlling. I wasn't sure what to think. On one hand, it was nice to see her take accountability, something she'd rarely done before. On the other hand, I couldn't help but wonder if this sudden change of heart was motivated by guilt or the growing backlash she'd been facing. People had started noticing her behavior, and not all the whispers were flattering. Soon after, our family hosted a BBQ. I wasn't planning to go, but my dad convinced me it would be good to show up and clear the air. I arrived late, hoping to avoid unnecessary small talk. Jessica approached me not long after I walked in. To my surprise, she apologized publicly in front of several relatives. She said she regretted how she'd acted during the wedding drama and acknowledged that she let the stress get to her. For a moment, it felt like progress. But then she added, almost as an afterthought, that she hoped I'd work on my obsession with makeup because it was becoming a bit much. It was a classic Jessica move, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. I took a deep breath, told her firmly that I wouldn't tolerate any more passive-aggressive comments, and walked away. The BBQ became awkward after that, with relatives avoiding eye contact and mumbling about family tension. A week later, I got a message from a mutual friend who had attended Jessica's wedding. She shared a few of the professional bridal photos, adding that she thought I might want to see them. The pictures showed Jessica looking beautiful, but there was something off in her expression. In many of the shots, she looked tense, almost like she wasn't enjoying herself. It confirmed what I'd suspected. Even without me there, Jessica couldn't fully relax on her big day. Seeing those photos made me feel even more confident about my decision to skip the wedding. I wasn't the problem. Her insecurity was. Around the same time, Jessica found herself facing online backlash. Someone had anonymously posted about her wedding behavior on a local forum, detailing her unreasonable demands and the drama with her sister. The post didn't name names, but it was specific enough for people in our social circles to connect the dots. Jessica's reputation took a hit, with several acquaintances reaching out to me, asking if the story was true. Jessica, of course, assumed I was behind the leak. She called me, accusing me of spreading the story to make her look bad. I denied it, and she didn't push the issue further, but the conversation ended on a sour note. Later, I found out from another cousin that Jessica had been venting about me at work, claiming I was out to ruin her life. It was exhausting to hear, but I chose not to engage. At this point, it felt pointless to argue with her. On a brighter note, all the drama inspired me to channel my energy into something positive. I started a blog about self-expression and confidence, sharing stories about my journey with makeup and the lessons I'd learned along the way. The blog gained traction quickly, with readers commenting on how relatable my posts were. It felt good to turn a painful experience into something meaningful. A few weeks later, my dad invited me to lunch. He told me he wanted to help Jessica and me mend our relationship, but this time he took a different approach. Instead of asking me to compromise, he focused on giving us a neutral space to talk. Jessica showed up reluctantly, but to my surprise, the conversation went better than I expected. For the first time, Jessica admitted she'd always felt overshadowed by me in certain ways. She said my ability to express myself so confidently had made her feel inadequate, even if she couldn't put it into words at the time. Hearing her say that was eye-opening. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it helped me understand where some of her actions were coming from. We ended up reminiscing about our childhood, laughing over shared memories of family vacations and silly inside jokes. For a moment, it felt like the tension melted away. But even as we found common ground, I knew I needed to set boundaries for my own mental health. After that lunch, I decided to take a step back from Jessica. I told her I appreciated the apology and the conversation, but I needed time to focus on myself. She didn't argue, which was a small miracle in itself. My decision wasn't met with universal approval. My mom called me, upset that I wasn't fully reconciling with Jessica. Other relatives took sides, with some saying I was right to prioritize my well-being and others accusing me of being cold. But for the first time in years, I didn't care what anyone else thought. My blog was thriving, my friends were supportive, and I finally felt free to live my life without constantly worrying about Jessica's opinion. I ended my latest Reddit post by thanking everyone who had followed my story and offered advice. Their support had been a lifeline during one of the most challenging times in my life. Now, I'm focusing on building a future where I prioritize my happiness, and that feels pretty amazing. Update 4. After the forum post about Jessica's behavior gained traction, things started spiraling for her in ways I hadn't expected. A few of her friends and acquaintances, who I assume connected the dots, quietly unfollowed her on social media. I heard through a mutual contact that people were gossiping about her controlling nature and her obsession with appearances. The whisper spread, and I got a text from another cousin saying she'd overheard someone at a bridal boutique mentioning Jessica's wedding drama. It wasn't hard to figure out why Jessica was so quick to blame me for the leak, even though I had nothing to do with it. The family became even more divided after this. Some relatives began openly criticizing Jessica, saying her behavior was a cautionary tale of what happens when insecurities go unchecked. Others doubled down on defending her, claiming I was being stubborn and refusing to move on. At this point, it felt like every family gathering came with an undercurrent of tension, even when Jessica and I weren't there. Meanwhile, my blog about self-expression and confidence started gaining momentum. What began as a small passion project turned into something much bigger. Readers resonated with my posts, sharing their own stories of dealing with family drama and the pressure to conform. The comments were full of support, with many people saying my journey inspired them to embrace their individuality. I hadn't anticipated this kind of response, but it was deeply validating. Around this time, Jessica's husband reached out to me. He sent a carefully worded message, apologizing for his role in enabling the wedding drama. He admitted that he had tried to mediate between us during the planning process, but realized he hadn't handled it well. He also hinted that Jessica was struggling with the backlash from the forum post and suggested she needed time to reflect. It was an unexpected olive branch, but I wasn't sure how to respond. For now, I decided to leave it at a polite acknowledgement. Then rumors surfaced that Jessica was planning a redo of her wedding photos. A cousin mentioned it in passing, saying Jessica wanted a smaller, more intimate shoot to capture the stress-free vibe she felt was missing from the actual day. The kicker? I wasn't invited. While I felt a twinge of sadness, I also couldn't help but feel relieved. It was just another reminder that Jessica and I needed space. As I continued to process everything, I started therapy. The sessions helped me unpack years of feeling overshadowed by Jessica and the resentment I hadn't fully acknowledged until now. I realized that much of the tension between us came from deeply rooted family dynamics, not just the wedding drama. Therapy became a safe space for me to sort through my feelings and set healthier boundaries moving forward. Mom, however, was still a wild card. On one hand, she occasionally admitted that Jessica's behavior had strained her relationships with others. On the other, she continued pressuring me to reconcile, saying things like, "You're sisters. You'll regret this distance someday." The mixed messages were exhausting, but I kept reminding myself that I wasn't responsible for fixing everything. Meanwhile, Jessica started posting cryptic captions on Instagram. Phrases like "some people never learn to be humble and family should mean loyalty, not betrayal" popped up regularly. It was clear they were directed at me, and I decided to block her. It wasn't an easy decision, but I needed peace of mind, and her posts weren't helping. A month later, both Jessica and I were invited to a mutual cousin's wedding. I hesitated at first, worried the event would turn into another battlefield. But my friends encouraged me to go, reminding me that avoiding events because of Jessica gave her too much power. I decided they were right and RSVP'd. The wedding day started off smoothly enough. I avoided Jessica and stuck to chatting with other relatives and friends. But during a bathroom break, Jessica found me. She accused me of being vindictive and attention-seeking, throwing out claims that I'd ruined her reputation. I kept my voice calm and reminded her I was only there to celebrate our cousin. My lack of reaction seemed to frustrate her even more, and she left the bathroom in a huff. Later that evening, Jessica created a scene at the reception. I wasn't nearby, but multiple people told me she loudly complained about me to a group of relatives, saying I'd turned the whole family against her. The bride herself had to pull Jessica aside and scold her for causing drama at someone else's wedding. After the reception, the bride came up to me and apologized on Jessica's behalf. She thanked me for handling the situation gracefully and admitted she'd had her own issues with Jessica in the past. Her words were a small comfort after an otherwise tense day. Back at home, my blog continued to grow. Some commenters started speculating that I might be the same Emma from the now viral Reddit story. While I didn't confirm or deny it, the parallels were hard to ignore. It made me realize how much my story resonated with others, even beyond my small corner of the internet. In the weeks following the cousin's wedding, Jessica went quiet. No Instagram posts, no group chat messages, nothing. Relatives speculated that her husband had encouraged her to take a step back and reflect. I didn't reach out to her, choosing instead to focus on my own life. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally in control of my narrative. My blog had become a platform for others to share their own stories, and the community we were building felt like a silver lining to all the chaos. Update 5. Months passed after Jessica's radio silence, and life seemed to settle into a new normal. I focused on my blog, which was now reaching a wider audience than I'd ever anticipated. Readers were sharing their own stories of navigating family drama, and it felt empowering to be part of a supportive community. Just when I thought Jessica was out of the picture for good, she called me out of the blue. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Jessica's voice was hesitant, not the commanding tone I'd grown used to. She told me she'd been in therapy for a few months and realized how her insecurities had driven her actions. She wanted to repair our relationship. Her tone seemed sincere, but I couldn't ignore the history between us. Still, I agreed to meet her for coffee, wanting to hear what she had to say in person. When we met, Jessica admitted she'd been projecting her own feelings of inadequacy onto me. She talked about how my confidence and self-expression had always made her feel insecure, even if she hadn't realized it at the time. She said she regretted how she'd treated me during her wedding planning and acknowledged the damage it caused to our relationship. It wasn't easy to sit through, but it felt like the most genuine apology I'd ever received from her. I accepted her apology but made it clear that I wouldn't tolerate any controlling behavior in the future. If it happened again, I told her I'd have no problem cutting contact permanently. She nodded, and for the first time, it felt like she really understood my boundaries. A few weeks later, our dad organized a family dinner to help facilitate the reconciliation. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I decided to go. if only to show Jessica I was willing to meet her halfway. The evening was tense, our mom was on edge, and other relatives seemed unsure whether to act like everything was normal or tread carefully. Despite the awkward atmosphere, there were no major blow-ups, and Jessica kept her composure. It felt like progress, even if only a small step forward. After the dinner, Mom pulled me aside. She apologized for how she'd taken Jessica's side during the wedding drama, admitting she'd felt pressured to prioritize Jessica as the bride. She said she regretted not supporting me more and hoped we could all move on. Her apology caught me off guard, but I appreciated it nonetheless. Over the next few months, I noticed changes in Jessica. She stopped making passive-aggressive comments and started reaching out in more thoughtful ways. For example, she sent me a birthday card with a heartfelt message, something she hadn't done in years. She also began asking about my blog and genuinely seemed interested in my work. While I was cautious about fully trusting her, these small gestures made me think she was serious about changing. As our communication improved, Jessica opened up about her own struggles. She admitted she'd felt overshadowed in her marriage, too, and that those feelings had forced her to confront her pattern of controlling behavior. Hearing her be so vulnerable was a side of her I wasn't used to, and it gave me hope that our relationship could evolve into something healthier. At one point, Jessica suggested we try joint therapy to address some of the lingering tension between us. I agreed, and the sessions turned out to be surprisingly helpful. The therapist helped us identify triggers and taught us strategies to navigate future conflicts. It wasn't a magic fix, but it gave us a foundation to build on. As word spread through the family that Jessica and I were working on our issues, the atmosphere shifted. Relatives who had taken sides during the wedding drama seemed relieved to see us talking again. Even our mom seemed less stressed, although she still had moments of trying to play mediator unnecessarily. Jessica's husband reached out again during this time, thanking me for giving Jessica another chance. He shared that her therapy had also improved their marriage, which was a nice reminder that personal growth has ripple effects. Then something unexpected happened. I got engaged. My fiancé proposed during a weekend getaway, and it was everything I'd ever wanted. Simple, heartfelt, and drama-free. Jessica offered to help with the wedding planning, but I politely declined, preferring to avoid any potential conflicts. She took it well, which felt like another small victory. On my wedding day, Jessica surprised me with a speech during the reception. She stood up and talked about how much she admired my confidence and individuality, acknowledging the mistakes she'd made in the past. It was emotional and heartfelt, and it felt like a true turning point in our relationship. As I looked around the room that night, I couldn't help but reflect on how far things had come. Standing up for myself during Jessica's wedding had been one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but it had also been the most rewarding. Setting boundaries hadn't just protected me, it had forced the people around me to respect my autonomy. I ended my journey where it began, on Reddit. I wrote a final post, thanking the community for their advice and support throughout the chaos. I shared the lessons I'd learned about family, boundaries, and the importance of self-respect. My closing message was simple. Even when it's difficult, prioritizing your well-being is always worth it.